good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to my complete Lady Nifle guide. Lady Nifle is one of, if not the strongest DPSs, and today we'll cover everything you need to know about her. Her best weapons, wedges, introns, teams, and much more with a showcase at the end. Let's start off by talking about what Lady Nifle actually does. First off, her main damage skills, Lunar Hunt and Solar Eclipse. These are two skills in one, and using either skills makes Nifle's E alternate between one or the other. At the start of any battle, you'll start out with Lunar Hunt. When cast, it creates one Lunar Hunt, dealing Umbro damage in a circle to all enemies in front of Nifle, and decreasing enemy move speed by 30% for 3 seconds. After casting Lunar Hunt, the skill is replaced with Solar Eclipse. Solar Eclipse deals a circle of Lumino damage in front of Nifle, reducing enemy attacks by 25% for 3 seconds. Right off the bat, Lunar Hunt and Solar Eclipse are what makes Lady Nifle so interesting. She's technically a Lumino character, but only half of her damage is Lumino. The other half is actually Umbro. Now, in her ultimate, this is more of a 75-25 split, but this means that she's great against both Lumino and Umbro disadvantaged enemies. This does also mean that she can't take full advantage of the 400% elemental weakness buff against Umbro enemies, or the 400% elemental weakness against Lumino enemies. Honestly, this would be really important and a big negative point to her damage if she didn't have so much raw damage thanks to her ultimate, Misty Sea Requiem. Activating Misty Sea Requiem makes Lady Nifle go into Funeral Rite state. While she's in this state, any skill range over 100% gets converted to skill damage at a 1-to-1 ratio, and skill range is reduced to 100%. Ranged weapons gain a 60% trigger probability boost, Lunar Hunt pulls enemies towards the center, and Solar Eclipse gets a massive damage buff. On top of everything else, both of her skills cost 0 sanity to use in Ultimate. Funeral Rite state ends after you cast Nifle's skill 6 times or after a base 12 seconds. Misty Sea Requiem is mainly a damage booster, but the grouping from Enhanced Lunar Hunt is also what makes Nifle great to use as a teammate. Moving on to her passive, Interwoven Cries. Lady Nifle's passive gives Lunar Hunt a chance to spawn a Solar Eclipse at the same location and vice versa based on a percentage of ranged weapon trigger probability, up to a 50% chance at max level. Lunar Hunts and Solar Eclipses spawned by her passive cannot be buffed by Misty Sea Requiem. Nifle's passive upgrades are Attack, Skill Range, and a 50% attack buff for Lumino characters when deployed as a teammate. Nightfall gives Lunar Hunt a 50% chance to trigger Umbro bonus effects and Solar Eclipse a 50% chance to trigger Lumino bonus effects. Now, at this point, I would usually go over Lady Nifle's playstyle, but because Introns affect Lady Nifle's gameplay so much, we'll take a look at her best Introns and best Intron investment before going on to anything else. Intron 1 buffs Lady Nifle's passive to take on 15% more ranged weapon trigger probability, and increases the max chance for Lunar Hunt and Solar Eclipses to spawn each other to 65%. Intron 2 makes enemies take 75% more damage from Lunar Hunt and Solar Eclipse for 3 seconds when hit by either one. This is Nifle's first big damage spike. Introns 3 and 5 are the usual skill level ups, and Intron 4 increases healing received by 50% and sanity recovery by 25%. Now Intron 6 is where Lady Nifle's gameplay changes on a fundamental level. From being a borderline unplayable character who has to kill everything in one rotation before running out of stamina, to one that can dish out nukes basically forever. When dealing damage with a ranged weapon, every hit has a 25% chance to summon a Lunar Hunt or Solar Eclipse at the enemy's location with a limit of 1 per second. Instead of having to spend stamina on casting E outside of Funeral Rite state, you can use your ranged weapon to deal skill damage while restoring stamina. Because of this, if you're going to build Lady Nifle at all, getting I6 is an absolute must. Now let's talk about Lady Nifle's playstyle and how to actually get the most value out of her. When playing Lady Nifle, the goal is to stay in Funeral Rite state for as long as possible. The most optimal combo for this is 1 charge attack, ultimate, alternate between 1 cast of E and 1 charge attack 5 times, 2 charge attack, and 1 final E. For a more comfortable combo, 1 charge attack, ultimate, E, and charge attack 6 times also works. The only situation that you should spam E after ultimate is if you can kill a target in less than one rotation. We'll go over weapons in depth later, but for now, all you need to know is you need Embla and Fluorescence for this combo to work. Because the Lunar Hunts and Solar Eclipses spawned by ranged weapons deal more damage from Funeral Rite State's skill damage buffs. Extending Funeral Rite also extends the DPS window and makes it way more sanity efficient. The grouping from Enhanced Lunar Hunt also makes sure that you can hit more enemies at the same time. Outside of Funeral Rite State, only spam charge attacks until you can ult again. The animation of E is actually longer than charge attacks and their spawns of Lunar Hunt and Solar Eclipse, making it a DPS loss to use E. For advanced tips, we're looking at animation cancels, vertical range, and camera movement. The most important animation cancel for Lady Nipple is dash cancelling E animations during your ult rotation. Dash as soon as you see the ability appear on the ground, but not so early that you cancel the actual ability. Now if you don't want to dash cancel, you do have the option of just standing still during your ult combo. Unlike some other characters, Lady Nifle's skill doesn't have very much vertical range. Even a Helix Leap can stop your skill from hitting enemies, so stay on the ground when casting E. Speaking of E, the cast location of E is not set when you press the button, but instead when Nifle finishes the casting animation. You can use your camera to change where Nifle is looking during the animation to cast in a different direction, so don't worry about having to look at an enemy before casting E. It's faster to cast and then flick your camera at the enemy than the other way around. As a character, Lady Nifle is not only strong but also super versatile. Aside from the obvious, she works well as both a main DPS and a secondary DPS because of her big AoE, and she helps out a ton with enemy grouping thanks to her ultimate. She's also great in co-op because she has great damage outside of Funeral Rite and isn't exactly stamina hungry. Like we talked about earlier, Nifle's main downside is the need to get I6 to make her playable. It's a ton of time, resources, and secret letters that you could be spending on other characters or other weapons, but even if it's not now, and honestly even if you don't like playing her, building her at some point is worth it. With all of that out of the way, let's talk weapons and demon wedges. The best wedge setup for Nifle is Sidestep, Skyloom Wildfire, Morale, 1 Covenanter's Volition, and 4 Covenanter's Scorch. The final slot can be a duel for bossing, or 1 more Volition piece. For a purple wedge build, use Pan's Volition to save track shift modules. It's the same amount of skill damage for half the cost. Next up, let's talk about Lady Nifle's best weapons. For melee weapons, you have 4 options. In order of best to worst, Fathomless Sharkgaze and Siren's Kiss are tied for first. Wainwraith is second, and Withershade is last. Between Sharkgaze and Siren's Kiss, Sharkgaze has less mobility, but it gives Nifle 6 to 12% more skill damage from her ultimate. Siren's Kiss loses damage in exchange for more mobility with Piercing Ascent. Now, Wainwraith gives way less damage than Sharkgaze or Siren's Kiss, but it's in second for 3 reasons. First, a lot of other characters also use Wainwraith, so you get way more value out of smelts. Second, Wainwraith is capable of using Piercing Ascent. And third, Wainwraith increases damage outside of ultimate by giving skill damage instead of skill range. In terms of wedges, you won't be using melee weapons to attack, so equip Piercing Ascent to polearms, and In Full Bloom to Sharkgaze, along with movement speed, charge attack speed, and attack speed wedges. Moving on to ranged weapons. Embla and Fluorescence is the only option. It gives skill range, multi-target lock-on with every single arrow affected by multi-shot, and a skill damage bonus. It's not listed in the weapon description, but skill damage bonus is a separate, more powerful effect than skill damage percent. Instead of being additive based on base skill damage, it's a multiplicative bonus on top of everything that you already have. For wedges, prioritize trigger probability, multi-shot, and attack speed. Aim for 95 to 100% trigger probability with Trammel, Rage Trammel, and Edge Trammel. Get as much multi-shot as possible with Rain of Quivers, Holdover, and Fafnir's Hunt. Use Celerity and Celerity Cunning for faster enemy lock-on during charge attacks. Some people suggest Entropic Singularity, but this weapon is genuinely worthless on Nifle. Not only is its multi-target ability significantly worse than Embla, The trigger probability stat doesn't affect I6 procs, and TP conversion stops after 100%. It lacks the damage buffs that Embla provides, and even in modes where demon wedges are disabled like Mystic Maze, trigger probability is easy enough to get, nullifying any advantage that Entropic may have over Embla. Now let's talk about the best teammates and Geniemons for Lady Nifle. First up, Truffle and Filbert. With her healing, damage boost, and team-wide buffs, she's the best support for nearly everyone in the game. Nifle's best second teammate is Fina for her damage dealt buffs, attack, and pen buffs. With Fushu's released just around the corner, there's a high chance that she'll also be a strong support as skill damage and a sanity regen buffer. If you're watching this after Fushu's release, check the comments down below for an update. If you don't have Fina yet, Tabitha is a good option for skill damage bonus, and Margie is also an okay option. She has an 85% attack buff on her passive upgrades, which is great for early game, but she's eventually outclassed by other supports. For support weapons, equip Arclight Apocalypse to Truffle, and Dreamweaver's Feather to Fina. If you don't have Dreamweaver, or if you need stance reduction, a weapon with smash attack, like Tetherlash, Pyrothirst, or Destructo also works. Moving on to Geniemons. Lady Nifle's best options are Bulby for free-to-play option and Luminelf from the Bard's Tome. Bulby and Luminelf both buff character attack and deal damage, but Bulby's active skill increases skill damage taken by enemies, while Luminelf's active buffs Lumino damage for the character. Prioritize equipping Fierce and Keen for traits. As usual, Broboxy with the drop rate trait is best for farming. Next up is the Showcase. Lady Nifle is on a standard damage build with duel, Shark Gaze is on movement, and Embla is on the same setup that I showed before. Nifle's skills are at 8, 8, and 8, her Intron is at 6, and she is level 80. Truffle is level 70 with skills at 8, 6, 3, Intron 0, and she's on a standard buffing build with Serenity. Fina is also level 70, Intron is at 1, skills are at 6, 6, and 6, and she's on a standard buffing build with Uplift. Lady Nifle is an insanely strong DPS and sub DPS, so strong that you could call her broken. She has a ton of versatility and damage, and her only real downside is needing I6, which you can get in 3 hours of covert commissions max. This is a character with tons of upside and almost no downside, and realistically the only reason that you shouldn't play her is if you don't like her gameplay. So that's the end of my Lady Nifle guide. As always, any future updates will be in a pinned comment. Like, comment, and subscribe if you'd like to see more of this type of content or if you have any feedback. I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for watching.